Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. I am Chloe Tetro, the coaching lead here with Ready Care. For this morning, we're going to be looking at the rise of cold water therapy. We'll have a quick check on its effect to mood and mental well-being, a look at its effects on building our stress resilience, the brown fat activation, which is lots of people's interest around the cold water plunging. We'll have a look at its effects on recovery, physical performance, risks, and when to be cautious, and most importantly, how to get started safely. So, as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to pop them into the old chat section, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I cannot answer them, I'll just pop up my email address and you can email across an old question to me. So from the first proper autumnly day in Cork here, seeing people bob along by the sea with their little sea caps, and just over the last few years, it's very clear to see that the rise of popularity in sea dips and even backyard ice baths is on the up, and cold water exposure has really surged in popularity as a wellness trend. I even think there is a little documentary called Vitamin C, SEA, that looked at that. It was actually quite a lovely documentary just out a few years ago. But from a health perspective, science-based perspective, does immersing yourself in cold water actually benefit your health, or is it just a fad? Like, fads happen all over the place. So we'll have a quick look as to all of the key points that I mentioned here, and let you kind of make up your own mind where these things are concerned. So cold water immersion, so whether via winter swims or all around swims if you're in Ireland, cold plunges, cold showers, they've gone exceedingly mainstream in recent years. Is it something that's new? Not so much, but it's just become a lot more mainstream in the last few years. So it's mainly prior to that in the realm of athletes and polar bear club enthusiasts, but it's very much now a booming wellness trend. And that is not meant in any derogatory fashion, because some wellness trends are absolutely fantastic adaptations of things that just work. So global sales, of at-home cold plunge tubs are absolutely soaring, and social media is full of them. Remember, was it during COVID lockdowns, the ice water challenge? Or it's not quite that, but soon enough to it. So lots of proponents, really, people that engage in this practice. They claim it can boost everything from your mood to your immunity to your metabolism and help with pain relief. But what does the evidence actually show? So where your mood and your well-being are involved, lots of people report a euphoric feeling after a cold water plunge, and emerging science can back this up where the positive mood effects are concerned. So cold water exposure actually triggers a flood of neurochemicals that can lift your spirits. So you have your initial cold shock response, and then the body releases natural painkillers that enhance well-being, and norepinephrine noradrenaline, which is a neurotransmitter that will boost alertness and energy. So in a study immersing in 14 degrees Celsius, so it doesn't need to be zero or anything like that, but even cold water, 14 degrees Celsius, caused norepinephrine to spike by 530%, and dopamine, that lovely reward chemical we know, by 250%. So this neurochemical surge increases blood flow in the brain and can produce a natural high and increased focus. So we're in back to school, back to college, back to work time. And if you're looking for natural ways to get your focus back up, cold shower in the morning if you don't have readily access to a cold tub or the sea right outside. So Research findings echo these mood benefits. There is a 2021 experiment where college students took a 20-minute plunge in chilly seawater, so 13.6 on average degrees, and reported significantly lower negative emotions like tension, anger, fatigue, and much higher positive emotions like vigor and self-esteem compared to the control group. So another trial, 5 minutes in 20 degrees, which actually, I mean, that's summer water in Ireland, but 20 degrees in bath water left new cold water swimmers, so people that aren't used to the physiological effects, they felt more alert, they felt more proud, they felt more inspired. So remember, you don't have to go to sub-zero temperatures. Even a little bit colder than what you're used to actually garnishes some fairly good results. We'll have a look at how that is now with regards to the stress resilience. So beyond that little temporary mood lift, which is no small feat in and of itself, repeated cold exposure can actually train your body to handle stress better. And when people say to even bring down the dial on your shower just for the last few seconds, and build that up over time, the effects that has on stress, because essentially there's a concept called hormesis comes into play. So it's basically exposing yourself to very mild stressors, your microdosing stressors like cold, which can make you more resilient to other stressors. So I think of it like when people have phobias and they're afraid of spiders, for example, instead of just throwing you into a room with a giant spider, if you get used to looking at pictures of it, looking at videos of spiders, being in a room with a spider very far away, it reduces the amygdala load, it reduces the stress factors that go along with repeated small exposure. And this is a version of it. So physiology, if I could say it now, would be swimming. Physiology research can shows that plunging in cold water over time is a shock to the system, but our bodies adapt over time in amazing ways where basically it will reduce the spike in intensity, and that is transferable to other parts of your life. It can cross adapt to other challenges, meaning that you're less rattled. If you're less rattled by the cold shock, you might become less reactive to everyday stressors as well. So that cold training seems to basically recalibrate our stress hormones. When you first jump in, when you first get that cold slap of water, the stress hormone cortisol spikes along with adrenaline. But after a while, when you get out, that cortisol level drops below your baseline, below what it was when, prior to you going in, and it remains lower for a few hours. Now, remember, cortisol is not the enemy or anything like that. It's good to have our stress responses in times when we need our stress responses, but prolonged chronic elevated cortisol can be hugely detrimental to your metabolic health, to your sleep, your stress, your eating, your blood sugars, your blood pressure, all of these different things, weight gain around the midsection. So if there's a tool that's been proven to get your cortisol levels down for a few hours of your day to where they would have rested at base level for you, that's an absolutely incredible tool to have in your tool belt. So a cold water plunge can also give you a boost to your immune system, which I know is a bit counterintuitive because you'd think, you know, cold water seems on paper to be probably the worst thing for coughs and colds and all these different things, but there's still emerging research. There's still research being done in these sectors, but one large study in the Netherlands tracked over 3,000 people and found those who ended their showers with a 30-second to 90-second cold rinse for 60 days took 30%, so a third almost, over their yearly sick days. So rather than the control group where there was very little to no change. So the cold shower group reported fewer illnesses like the common cold, hinting that brief cold exposure can actually stimulate your immune system and harden resistance to infections. So while the study itself is quite striking, because a third over a year is a huge amount, there is still evidence and research to be done in the area. So the metabolic jolt, right, why a lot of people are landing on the cold water, metabolically speaking, is to do with an area of interest around how the metabolic jolt affects your metabolic health and your body composition, right? So you've probably heard that cold exposure can quote unquote burn calories. Now, shivering away in icy water, if that's how you choose to burn your calories, it does expend energy to stay warm. Now, during the cold immersion, metabolic rates can shoot up dramatically. So, in one experiment, people immersed in 14-degree Celsius water saw their metabolism increase by, wait for it, 350% as their bodies work to generate heat. Now, this happens through both the shivering, so that's musculature activity, and activation of brown adipose tissue, a special heat generating fat. So brown fat is like the body's internal furnace. When stimulated by cold, it burns stored fuel to produce heat, which is needed for thermogenesis. So humans only have a small amount of brown fat, but cold exposure can induce a browning, quote unquote, of regular white fat, converting it into a more metabolically active form. Now, what does that actually mean? what does it mean? So essentially, it can help with participants in studies show less body fat and improved insulin sensitivity, which is something I harp on with quite a lot in these morning talks, because insulin resistance, so the flip side of it, is the mechanism at play when there's metabolic dysfunction, including difficulty losing weight, increased ability to store weight, and knock-on effects like blood sugar difficulties, cholesterol difficulties, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all of these different conditions associated with insulin resistance. Now, the cold water, cold swimmers, cold showers have less of the body fat and improved insulin sensitivity, which suggests that cold habits can help protect against obesity and diabetes. So, overall, very good news if you're looking after insulin difficulties. So recovery from physical performance, it can help hugely with recovery, which is why it was popularized amongst athletes to begin with. So cold water immersion after workouts can speed up short-term recovery. Studies have found that athletes who took ice baths after exercise had lower markers of muscle damage and inflammation. And in fact, a post-exercise plunge within a 24-hour period half the release of creatine kinase, which is responsible for muscle fiber damage. So essentially, even a 10-minute ice pack, ice bath, cold shower can hugely quell inflammation. Now, what would be some of the risk factors and staying a little bit cautious when we're looking at the world of ice baths? So there's a massive buzz around anti-inflammation, boosting well-being, boosting insulin resistance, which will help as a knock-on effect. That will help with body fat difficulties and getting those in check a little bit. Now, there are some things to bear in mind, right, before you jump into the Atlantic Ocean. The most immediate danger, of course, would be what's known as the cold shock response, and that's when that initial water hits you. So if you're somebody that suffers from cardiovascular disease, previous history of cardiac attack, and all these different cardiovascular conditions, ease yourself into these things. You're better off not going from extreme heat to extreme cold. And just to be a bit clever about that, if it's extremely, extremely hot outside and you go into extreme cold, that change in temperature can sometimes affect your blood pressure, can sometimes affect stroke factors in very vulnerable individuals, i.e. individuals that have a history of these types of heart-related difficulties. Now, even for healthy individuals, hypothermia can be a concern. So making sure that you're not staying within the cold water longer than your system can hold it. Don't go more than 2 minutes in freezing cold water. Do not go by yourself. First and foremost, do not go by yourself, and making sure that you're clever about what your body is able to do, staying near, a ramp, a ladder, staying near, having people around yourself. Do not overexert yourself in cold water. And absolutely do not ever do these things alone. Don't go out swimming in water by yourself. Respecting your body, respecting your own needs, respecting where you're at, and always erring on the side of caution rather than being a mad thing. So how to get started safely, right? That the little caution message aside. So start gradually, particularly if you know yourself that you're very, very sensitive to the cold, that you have very little to no experience where these things are concerned. Ease in with milder cold exposure. As I said at the beginning of this, any movement towards colder than you're used to, you're still going to get your boost in endorphins. You're still going to feel that drop in your cortisol levels over the day as your baseline one. So don't feel that you have to go from nothing to mad thing in less than 60 seconds. So gradually bring down the temperature or gradually ease yourself in. Go for your 30 seconds. Control your breathing, right? That's one of the big things. If you take shallow breathing, that's going to shock your system even more. So if you think of slowing down your breathing, and this will sound mad, but the slower your breathing is, the more chill your response, the less it's actually going to give you a big body shock. And you'll also seem like RoboCop or Terminator walking into the ocean like that. But basically, the more you control your breathing into entry, the less of a shock you're going to have. Think of those Shaolin monks under the very cold waterfalls and that controlled breathing. There's an absolutely brilliant fella. If you're interested in this, you probably already know the name, but if you're just getting interested, I'll just pop it up on the screen there. Wim Hof. Wim Hof is the fella. If you're interested in all of this side of the benefits associated with cold water plunging on your cardiometabolic system, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your stress levels, everything. This is the fella to start to follow online. He's got loads of YouTube videos, books, Instagram following, whatever your platform of choice is. And fantastic first entry point into this. So there are huge, huge benefits across the board. The mood and mental well-being boost, the stress resilience, the metabolic jolt, and the recovery, anti-inflammation, and physical performance recovery period. Now, do go in with a little bit of, what would I say? Cop on. No, that's not the term. A bit of common sense, right? Don't go off into the middle of nowhere by yourself, throwing yourself off a boat, going, oh no, I have to stay within this ice bath I've chained myself to for the next 10 minutes because some beat his record. Take your time with things, do understand that. Be kind to your body. You will see advantages even if you tiptoe into it. The best one that I could say to people is just bring down the dial of your shower for the last 30 seconds and try to up it to 60 seconds and try to see how comfortable you can be building over time, incrementally with each shower that you have. Try to get the temperature a little bit lower and try to stay a little bit longer. And take note of how your energy goes after that. How do you feel after you've done that? And once we have evidence that these excruciating behaviors actually have a very bona fide positive effect on our day, it's a lot easier to keep up. So hope you found this helpful. Very short introduction into the rise of cold water therapy, and have a lovely rest of your day. We'll see you again now. Bye.